to Latinx Can, a podcast showcasing Latinx professionals who turn their dreams into realities. I'm your host, La Doctora Jenire Flores Delgado, and today I'm here with Dr. Stephanie Flores-Pollack, a physician en route to become a dermatologist who immigrated to the United States at the age of 15, and after becoming a doctor herself, she is here to tell you, si se puede, my friends, si se puede. In the first of this two-part episode, we will learn about her journey through high school and college in the U.S., the obstacles she had to surpass to become a college graduate, and some of the lessons she carries with her through life, including practical advice as to how to build the courage to ask for help, stepping outside your comfort zone to explore new things no matter how hard life is, and listening to the little sparks of joy that can help us find our passion. Dr. Stephanie encourages you to cultivate your identity and cherish the things that make you you, because after all, your story is your superpower. Dr. Stephanie Flores-Pollack, welcome to Latinx Can.
Thank you for having me here. I am so honored to share my story and to talk to you about Latinos in professions.
It's very, very exciting to me to have you here, and you have a very, very interesting story. So let's start by talking a little bit about where your story begins.
Yeah, so I am South American. I'm from Bogota, Colombia. My family is all from Colombia. I grew up there. And at the age of 15, my parents decided that my sister and I would have better educational opportunities in the United States. So I moved to the United States at a very young age. I had just turned 15. And as many child immigrants can relate to this, it was a complete shock in terms of the cultural experience that you have here, the language barriers, and just trying to get your feet on the ground and trying to figure out your future as a young adult, but also in a very foreign land.
That must have been really challenging, just being a teenager in a new country with a new language.
It was definitely challenging. I will say that there were a couple of blessings on my side. One of them being that I did go to a bilingual school in Colombia, so I had some English to work with. And the other one, which looking back is probably the most important one throughout my entire life, is that I came here with my parents, and I always have had their support and their love.
Which is so important, right? Keeping those families together and knowing that you have the support of somebody can lift you up in so many different ways.
Absolutely. And whether it's your parents, whether it's your uncle, your aunt, or a friend of a friend, coming to this country and having somebody to lean on is extremely important in the success of any immigrant.
And so you come to the States when you are 15 and you need to finish high school. But I can imagine it's probably a little different from high school in Colombia. I know from my own experience, all I knew about high school in the US was what I could see on the movies, and that was probably not representative. So how was that high school experience for you, and how do you figure out how to succeed?
Definitely, like you said, you come in with these very hazy images of what high school in the US is. And in reality was that I had to start school no matter what, and I was thrown into this new world. I made sure to always be on time in class, that was the most exciting part of my day. And I also sought out to advance my classes to the what's called here the AP level, the advanced placement level, because it gave me a sense of belonging more than anything. I wasn't very aware that these classes are taken mainly to advance in your college education. For me, it was actually my solace. And the best thing about these classes is that I found like-minded people who enjoyed studying, who had a natural curiosity. And that natural curiosity, I think, helped break down the language and cultural barriers between us. So I had a wonderful group of friends, very small, but these people really helped me feel at home and gave me the idea to apply for college.
That's really important, especially when you come into a new place. You really need to find whatever is familiar, I think, to keep you grounded and to help you battle everything else that's not familiar, that's very different.
Exactly. And once you find those people, you just don't let go, because these are the people that will inspire you to dream bigger. One of my very best friends is from Honduras. And one night we were having a conversation, and I mentioned to him that I had no money to go to college, so I would probably go work after high school. And he turned around and looked at me and he said, absolutely not. I will make sure that you go to college. You have to go to college. And
Wow.
that memory has always stayed with me. The fact that there was somebody out there believing when I couldn't believe in myself.
So how do you realize or find out what were the steps that you had to do to apply for college, and how do you find the financial means to do it?
Applying to college was a little bit of a chaotic experience. And I must say that in many ways, I got really lucky because I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. So it all started just by my friends, as I said, just planting the idea in my head. And I had confided very much in one of my biology teachers that I had no idea how to apply for college. So she not only she believed in me, but she basically walked me through the college application process. I ended up applying to only a few schools because, again, I wasn't very familiar with it. And I only applied to 3 schools in Texas since I did high school in Texas. 2 of them were the major state schools that accept students if they are in the top percent of their class. And so I knew I had a high chance of getting in because I was in a good academic standing. And I also applied to a private school in Houston, which is where I finished high school. And that was it. Those were all the college applications I filled out. Now, if you were to ask anybody who knows about the college application process, you actually apply to way more schools than that.
Right.
So I wouldn't really encourage anybody to just apply to 3 schools. And I would definitely it would have been helpful to have the guidance of a counselor. But that was just the way that it happened.
And how do you prepare for the SATs? I think for me, that was definitely totally different because when I did it, I was not used to standardized tests at all. And I thought that I was going to go in there and use my brain and solve the questions, but I just didn't have time for that. So, how do you do it?
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned standardized testing because my first encounter with standardized testing was the SATs. And I must confess that, like many child immigrants, we encountered these tests before even knowing they exist. And last thing you know, you are taking the test without any preparation whatsoever. That was the case in my life. Basically, I was told to show up on a certain day, and I just had to take the SAT and the ACT with very little preparation. It wasn't until I was a medical student talking to my faculty mentors that I found out that families who are well educated start preparing their children for the SAT as early as 7th grade.
Wow.
So in many ways, I was lucky because I had received an advanced education. As I told you, I put myself in a situation where I was taking advanced classes, and I did come from a school in Colombia that had high expectations of its students. But I think I can see how it would have been a very different story had I not only come in unprepared for the SAT, but I had not had the privilege to have been in those advanced classes.
Yeah, that definitely makes a difference because you might not have enough time to answer all the questions, but you still have the foundation that helps you answer some of them. So I took the SAT twice. The first time I took it, I did terrible. And I think my counselor, somebody told me, I don't think it's good enough to apply for university. And so I took it a second time and I had to call my dad and be like, Daddy, I'm so sorry. I have to spend more money into doing this test again because I didn't do it well the first time. And I was so disappointed in myself that I had done so terrible and that I had to pay money for that. Luckily, my dad was like, well, try it again. And we had the money to do it. So what I did the second time, like you said, I asked my friends to see how they were doing it. And I found out that there was a book that you can get that told you the strategy that you could use to pass the exam, which was not knowledge. It was all based on the process of elimination and other techniques that you can use to find the answer in a quick in a quick amount of time, right? Really fast, because that's what they're testing you for.
Yes, and I think you mentioned a very important point in the US educational system, that it kind of centers itself around these standardized tests. And when I passed the SAT almost by dumb luck, I thought that this was going to be my last encounter with standardized testing, but little did I know that I would later on be taking the MCAT, which is the admissions test for medical school. And within medical school, we have 3 different board exams, and they're all standardized tests.
Wow.
So I only came to the realization that I had to become a good test taker probably the 3rd year of college when I was applying to medical school. And like yourself, the first time I took the MCAT, I was completely devastated because I realized that just knowledge by itself and problem solving skills was not going to cut it. But instead, test taking strategies are extremely important to learn as part of your tool set to become a successful professional in the United States.
Wow, that's really important. It's I think, very good advice for anybody who's doing this for the first time. And I'm going to say one more thing is that I took the GRE trying to get into grad school. And again, I did terrible. I don't know how I got into grad school, but I made it. So it's possible you can get there. So you take the SAT, you apply to 3 schools, and what happened? Tell me a little more about that.
Well, so out of the 3 schools that I applied to, one of them held interviews in person. And as somebody with broken English who had no idea what they were doing, you can almost bet that I did terrible in that interview. I remember sort of going all over the place, being very nervous, and I was interviewed by this very, very well put together white woman, and I just felt so distant from her reality. I was struggling, my family was struggling, and it was really devastating. But I thankfully got an acceptance to Texas A&M University, and I must tell you that at the beginning, even with that acceptance, I thought I wasn't going to make it in because I couldn't afford the tuition. And we decided to call the Office of Financial Aid and give them information about myself. And actually, my mother asked to speak to somebody who spoke Spanish. And once we got with a financial aid counselor who spoke Spanish, she explained to them that I was very motivated and that they should give me a scholarship for the first year. And that was probably one of the biggest miracles in my life because
Mm-hmm.
I received a scholarship as a result of that phone call. So I barely got through, but I did it.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important thing is one of the things I've learned as well in my experience is that sometimes we encounter obstacles and we think that they're there forever, that there's no way that we're going to surpass them, but we don't even try. Right? Sometimes we just accept it as it is and say, that's it. I don't have money to pay for school. What am I gonna do? Nothing is gonna happen. What I've learned is that if you do that, if you knock on the door and try to talk to somebody, the answer might be no, I can't help you, but it might be maybe let me see what I can do. And I think that makes a huge difference. And if you really care about something, you have to knock on so many doors so that eventually you figure out how to do it.
I completely agree. After 10 plus years of being in the educational system and trying to become a professional, I carry a few lessons with me. And that one in particular, when my mom taught me by just showing me to ask for help, it really stuck around. And now that I look back and I talk to parents whose kids are in the process of applying to college, that is the first thing I emphasize, and that is to ask for help.
Mm,
Whatever that means for them, whether it is to ask their bosses for help,
mm-hmm,
ask school counselors for help. But if you don't know, that is okay. Somebody knows.
mm.
So I absolutely agree with you. It was a lesson in life. And from then on, that's what I did. I asked for help whenever I needed, I was lacking on something. I
Mm-hmm.
made sure to let my mentors know that I needed that tool from them.
Mm.
And it really proved to be valuable in the success of my career.
That's a great learning. But Stephanie, asking for help might be a bit vulnerable for people. It requires you to acknowledge that there's something lacking and then to get the courage to ask for help. Did you find anything that helped you find the courage?
Yes, there are a few things that you have to take an inventory of before you set onto the mission to ask somebody for help. So I think that the first thing is to take a step back and reflect on your own value. Think about the things
Mm,
that make you stand out and that you can not only bring to the table, but the potential that you have in 5, 10, or 15 years.
mm-hmm,
Once you really understand the value that you bring, you will have more confidence, you
mm,
will have more ability to communicate what your future goals are,
mm-hmm,
and you will be more convincing towards the person that you are asking for help. So I would
mm-hmm,
say number one, know your value and know how to communicate your value. Second thing that I think is important is to understand what exactly you're asking. The
mm-hmm,
more concrete you can be, the more specific you can be, the better. So
mm-hmm,
whether that is you need help in just having information
mm-hmm,
is very different to having financial help, which is
mm-hmm,
also very different from having networking help. And you will find in life that there are people that can offer different types of help.
mm-hmm,
So when you identify a person that has the resources that you need, a counselor, somebody who's already gone through the process,
mm-hmm,
a professor, once you identify the resource they have, when you ask for help, you have to be very specific about what exactly you need from them and
mm-hmm.
how do you need it, in what form. And then I would say the third thing is that um, you have to have courage, meaning always tell yourself that the worst thing that happens is that it's a no. Other than that, you are in the same position. 1,000 doors can close, but you only need one door. Just because you hear a no, it doesn't mean you should give up.
That's great advice. That's very helpful. I think those are things that you can take with you wherever, but the earlier you put it into practice, the easier it will be to use it over and over and over again. You said you got accepted into Texas A&M. You graduated with a double major in biomedical sciences and chemistry and a minor in neuroscience. And at some point considered getting just a major in chemistry so that you can go to grad school. How did you figure it out while you were in college, what to study and how to prepare yourself for your future steps?
I definitely, as one common theme in my story is that I tend to find a home in the subjects that I like to study. Studying has always been my haven for when I
Mm-hmm.
feel lonely or when
Mm-hmm.
I feel out of place. And that was also the case in A&M in the university, where I try to find my little home. And I started out with biomedical sciences, but I took this organic chemistry class and I was just taken away by the problem solving skills necessary for the class, the classmates that I had, my professor. I was just very inspired.
Mm-hmm.
And those little sparks of inspiration, I think, are the things that young professionals need to really be paying attention to.
Mm-hmm.
Because when your heart tells you that there is something there that inspires you, it's really a very good way to get to know your vocation, basically what really is going to drive you in life. So I decided to pursue the major in chemistry to see if graduate school would be my career. And I also started doing undergraduate research, which is how we met
Yeah.
in the same laboratory. So I think that, knowing to be flexible in times of inspiration is extremely
Mm-hmm.
important. And while I will tell you that in the background, I was really struggling with my finances, I was struggling with just making ends meet. College was probably one of the only times in my life that I would have the flexibility to choose interests and to see what really sparked joy in me. So I really want to encourage all of the listeners to take that college experience to really explore things that are outside of their comfort zone, things that are probably maybe not even in their mind. And even looking back, I think I should have even explored more, maybe into the liberal arts, maybe into design. You know, I think that that's basically where it all came up. And in the very end, when it came down between chemistry and medicine, I decided to actually take a year off to make that decision. And I would work full time as a scientist in the laboratory, and
Mm-hmm.
I would volunteer part time in a clinic. And
Okay.
finally, just the human interactions that I was getting in the clinic, the gratefulness from the patients, and the intersection between science and humanities that the clinic was just exposing me to
Mm-hmm.
made me decide to go to medical school.
So you mentioned that college was your opportunity to explore. How did you find out all of these opportunities that were on campus? For me, I tell you a little bit. Like you, I was an international student and I had a lot of support. But I should mention I was an athlete when I was in college. So I was part of the diving team, and that took probably more than 50% of my time. And what was left was going to school. Then eventually, after my first year, I quit the diving team and decided to focus 100% on my studies. And then I find out that the people in my class are doing research and that they're preparing to take the GRE for chemistry. And this is sophomore year, and I'm like, what is going on? Like I don't know how to. How do you find that out?
I'm trying to think back, and what really made a difference for me is that the minute that I stepped into campus, I saw myself as a little antenna. Whatever people were doing, I was picking up and I was trying to figure out if that was for me or not. One of the very first things I did is I signed up for a bunch of listservs. And every time a seminar was offered or something was free, I
Mm-hmm.
would immediately go and and sign up for these
Yeah.
seminars. So one of those seminars was how to get into medical school. And I remember just writing down the step-by-step process of what they had.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally took it to heart, where I had to kind of go almost like a treasure hunt and kind of fulfill these experiences in my life. So
Okay.
going shadowing, doing research, volunteering. And, looking back, you don't really need all of those experiences to be accepted to medical school.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely not. But I think in some sense, it gave me a compass. As somebody who did
Mm-hmm.
not know the
Mm-hmm.
medical school process, it gave me a little bit of a map, a roadmap to
Mm-hmm.
really explore what medicine was all about.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the one advice I would say is keep your eyes and your ears open,
Mm-hmm.
and just attend things that the university hosts. And you never know.
Yeah.
Again, look for that spark and write some notes down and go do those things. Seek out those experiences.
Yeah, it's also a good way to get free food.
Absolutely. As a hungry undergraduate student, I would not pass up any free meetings.
That's really funny. So you have a very, very busy course load. You have research. You worked in a few different areas as well. You also were the founder, the co-founder of the Salsa group at Texas A&M. Tell us a little bit more about how that happened and what motivated you to start that salsa club.
Yeah, so I think that the common thread is really trying to find a home,
Mm-hmm.
because when you are an immigrant, when you are familiar with an environment that is totally different from what your reality
Mm-hmm.
is, one of the best ways you can just have a good mental health is just build your own home, build your own environment. And for me, salsa has always been one of the ways in which I connect to my own culture.
Mm-hmm.
My family has listened to salsa since I was a baby. I grew up listening to all these amazing artists, and I learned to dance from a young age.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually happened to meet another student who was a dancer, a trained dancer. I by no means was a trained dancer, and
Mm-hmm.
he was just lamenting on the fact that A&M lacked any Latin dance groups.
Mm-hmm.
So I just looked at him and say, well, what if we seek out interest? So we actually went into a Facebook, which at the time was brand new,
Uh-huh.
and we just posted it to our friends asking if anybody was interested, and the amount of responses we got was overwhelming. So we decided to go ahead and make it an organization. Then, word of mouth got through, and we became an officially recognized organization.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, it has now become part of the fabric of what makes Texas A&M unique, and I think a haven for many Latinos who
Mm-hmm.
come into a new environment and are trying to just find a home. But also, I think that the most beautiful thing about salsa fusion is that it has exposed people who are unaware of the Latin culture, and has exposed them into the beautiful world of dancing, of
Yeah.
Latin music, of happiness, connection. So that's been, I think, the most fulfilling part of that whole process.
I feel identified because the reason why I chose the University of Florida as one of the universities I wanted to go to was because it was in Florida and it had a lot of Latino and Latinx people. Before I was in Florida, I spent 2 years in the Kingdom of Eswatini in Southern Africa, and I was one of three Hispanics in a school of 500. And I loved the experience so much because I got to learn so much about other cultures and other people and other people's experiences. But after 2 years, I was like, okay, I want to still be able to have this and still have connection and go and dance salsa and go and speak Spanish. And all of those things were so important to me that that's how I chose the university I went to. So when I come to Texas A&M for my PhD, that's not there anymore. And it was a challenge, I definitely can identify it, and I agree with you. It's so important to find those things that make you comfortable, that helps you be grounded, where everything is everything else is challenging.
And looking back, I also think I maintain a very good sense of my identity through these interests. So I think
Mm,
for people who are going through these processes of going to college, going to graduate schools, it is so important to maintain a sense of identity and nurture those interests that are so unique to you, whether it's painting, whether it's music, whatever it may be, that makes you unique. And that is such an important part of yourself that you need to
mhm.
continue to nurture.
Yeah. It's your story, right? And I think, the story or one story is one superpower. It's what makes you you. It's what differentiates you from everybody else. And definitely it's one of those things that helps you connect with other people because they might not have the same story, but they have the same passion for their own story. I think is one of those things that's really important to like you say, culture and share.
Hmm. That's right.
So senior year comes and you are about to graduate and you find out that you get selected for a Brown Rudder Award at Texas A&M. And this is the highest honor that can be given to a graduating senior at Texas A&M. And there comes this Latinx person, this Latina, empowered through her own story to go from not really knowing whether she was going to be able to get to A&M, and then she graduates as one of the top two seniors in a class of 7,000. Tell us what it meant to you to achieve that accomplishment.
So, yeah, winning the Brown Rudder Award, first of all, was a surprise at the graduation. So
Wow.
they knew, the nominees knew they were nominated, and one nominee was representing each individual college of the university. So all of them knew about this process, but it was only announced at graduation. And of course, it
Mm,
was a big shock when they called my name. I had to walk to the stage, and I just remember being really nervous. Almost in disbelief. But I think overall, it was a sense of affirmation
mm,
that while my application and my resume at that point wasn't the perfect resume, I didn't have, this perfect life led to that point.
mm-hmm,
It was an affirmation that you don't need to be polished, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be persistent
mm-hmm.
and you need to be true to yourself. And those two things are going to just send you much farther than striving for perfection. So it was just a beautiful moment, especially because later on I found that the people that nominated me were my own mentors, and
Mm-hmm.
the things that they wrote about me were things related to the fact that I had broken so many barriers,
Mm-hmm.
that I had immigrated and knowing basically nothing, I built this community around me. And so it was that they found valuable. It wasn't my knowledge. It wasn't my pedigree. So, this is really, I think, in many ways, just amplifies the value that immigrants bring to this country.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that we
Yeah.
can come from a foreign land knowing very little, but
Mm-hmm.
with grit, with
Yeah.
commitment, and with, just our dreams, we can build castles. We can be very successful.
So things look pretty good when we look at it from the outside, right? You found an organization, you had mentors, and you're given this award that is so significant at Texas A&M. Was it always easy?
Absolutely not. And I wish that resumes carried both the highs and the lows of a person's life, because in reality was that my college experience was also very chaotic, just like applying for it was. As we know, I was kind of figuring things out as we went.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, my mom was mainly working at a child care center. My dad was trying to become a certified teacher. So they had very
Mm-hmm.
little income. and I was relying just on scholarships. So if the scholarships ran out, I could not pay for rent or food. And many times I found myself stretching myself thin in terms of my finances, but also in terms of my mental health. And I think that had I been a little bit more self-aware, I would have noticed the early signs of somebody that was so focused on trying to make it into the world that they forgot to take care of themselves. And that experience particularly came afloat in second year of my undergraduate, when I started sleeping less. I became more flat affected. My mom became sick and I could not go see her because I was in the middle of finals. And I just basically, what I did not know is that I was experiencing depression. And I was not, I think that in the Latin culture, we are not taught so much about the signs of depression.
Yeah.
We're also not told to seek help. So I didn't seek help until it was pretty late into it, and I could barely get myself up to do the things during the day because I couldn't sleep. And I remember going to the doctor, complaining about all of these physical manifestations. And he looked at me in the eye and he asked me, "Do you think that you are depressed?" And when he asked me that, I just broke down. That was it. That was what's going on with me. So it definitely not easy. And I think that had I had the ability to share my experiences, I think a friend or somebody would have told me to take the foot off the gas and to really take some time for myself.
Thank you for sharing that, because like you said, I think in the Latinx community, it's a taboo. I think it's a taboo for many cultures to talk about mental health, but especially in the Latinx community, we think that we will solve everything with just working hard. And I think about this comedian, Mexican American. Her name is Cristela Alonso, and I went to see her last year here in Houston. And she said, during her sketch, she said, I was having a lot of problems and I just didn't know what it was. And when I finally got an insurance, I went to the doctor and I told him or her everything that I was feeling. And it turns out I was depressed. And she says, "I thought I was just poor. I didn't know that was depression."
That is exactly my experience. I thought I was just too busy, but it turns out that it is an illness. And now, being a physician, I see it from the other side. I see it how it affects my patients. And so when somebody comes to me with these somatic complaints, I try to really normalize the experience and have them understand that depression does not make you weaker. Depression does not make you less worthy of the things in your life. But if anything, depression is a real illness. In my case, it was an important wake-up call. And by the time that I made it to medical school, one of the very first things I did was to find the counseling office and make an appointment, because I knew that I had to take care of my mental health to be a successful medical student.
That's very good learning. And so let's take the opportunity to talk about what are those signs of depression, those early signs of depression that if you identify them, you can be better prepared to seek help.
One of the things that people experience at the very beginning of a depression is the inability to find joy in normal things that they typically enjoy. If you enjoy working out or you enjoy going to class, and you're just finding yourself not being fulfilled in that respect, that is one early sign. Now, in terms of physical complaints, people will start experiencing a loss of appetite or starting to eat too much, and the sleep patterns completely go awry. Some people have a lack of sleep, especially those who are high performers will have a lack of sleep. And then in the later stages, you may have too much sleep, and to the point that it's hard for you to get out of bed to find motivation. And then, when we think of depression, we think of suicidality, but that is truly a very late form of depression.
Mm.
And not many people get to suicidal thoughts. But I do encourage anybody who starts having thoughts of harming themselves, or what we call passive suicidal ideation, which means thinking that the world would be better off without you.
Mm-hmm.
That is
Mm.
a red flag and an emergency. That means you have to call somebody and tell them exactly how you feel, because that is a late form of depression.
And are there any resources that are accessible to people that might not have health insurance?
Yes. So unfortunately, mental health is an underfunded institution in this country. So mental health clinics are hard to find in between, especially free health clinics. But the one thing that everybody must know is that there is a national suicide lifeline,
Mm-hmm.
and it is 24/7. And so even if the thoughts are passive, like I said, there's no plan, it is good to call the lifeline and just talk to somebody that can listen to you. And it's a very easy number. It's talk 8255. You can also look it up on the internet, have
Mm-hmm.
it on speed dial. And so that is an important resource to have. But I would say that even people who are in the early phases of depression,
Mm-hmm.
the best thing they can do is to express those feelings with a loved one. And just having support from a loved one can take you out of that depression state, because just being heard is so comforting and therapeutic that in itself is, it's free, and it'll help you get out of that state.
With her professional medical advice, we end the first part of this episode, and I encourage you to listen to part 2 to learn more about how Dr. Stephanie made her way to medical school, what the application process is like, and what you can do to prepare for a medical school interview. Thank you for listening to this podcast. And if you want to put a face to the voices you just heard, you can follow us on Instagram at LatinxCan. If you have questions or feedback for us, you can email us at latinxcan@gmail.com. And if you like this episode, please leave a review. It is the quickest way to grow as a community. Once again, thank you for listening, and remember, unidos somos más.